Okay, it's December 29th, 4:58 a.m. I'm remaking a video that I just made now, and I couldn't upload it. So let me explain to you. Because I basically I was telling you the details of my father's death on September 8th, 2001. I had just recorded a video. I wrote it all out, and I wrote it all down again. I wrote it down so I can record it again. I just recorded a video with some music from a local radio station, including a Justin Timberlake song, and then went on to recount the details of my father's death on September 8th, 2001. In trying to upload that video just now, it was blocked due to third-party content, and it is too confusing for me to try to trim it. So what I did was I deleted it, listened to the original, which I just did now, typed what I said, I typed what I said, and then I'm re-recording basically the facts of what I said, because the bitches who are the bane of my existence are trying to censor me again. Now look who's on YouTube. Yeah, my pal. I just watched last night Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. Lara Croft Tomb Raider was made it was released June 15th, 2001, and I'm going to upload the trailer, but I suggest you watch that, because it basically brings to mind, it outlines everything related to what happened to me, then and now. My father's death in 2001, my cat in the shed, this year, Hurricane Sandy, you name it, it's there. So I suggest you watch Lara Croft Tomb Raider for your viewing pleasure. It was $2.99 on the YouTube, and I just had it on my. It said it wasn't available on Comcast, but it was available, so I watched it. Anyway, let's go back to the story. My father died September 8th, 2001. How I came to be down here with my parents, that's another story. In July 1994, that's when I came down here. I had my own condo in Mount Arlington. I was in the psych ward in St. Clair's Hospital in Dover. That's a separate story related to the whole indecent proposal thing that I told you the other day, and the thing with the lawyer and all that, and how I was sort of unraveling at that time. I was holed up I quit my job. I was holed up in my condo for several months. I was so traumatized by the propaganda media blitz, like I'm getting now. At that time, I was so traumatized, I just was incommunicado. I didn't talk to anybody, didn't listen to any TV or radio. Well, it came to a bad point physically. It was very hot, and I had no water. They had turned off my water, turned off my sewer. I was drinking a contact lens cleaning solution. I had no water. I called my mother up in emergency. My mother called the police. I said, "Mom, bring me some orange juice." My mother was down the shore. So she called my brother. My brother called the police. The police came. I went to St. Clair's Hospital. And then I was in the psych ward. Okay, at that time, that was also June 1994, the O.J. Simpson situation, the famous Bronco chase. I did not see that because I did not have my TV on. I didn't find out about the whole O.J. Simpson murders until I got in the psych ward, St. Clair's Hospital. So, my father in July, my father got a job working for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection when he was 60 years old. He had for many years a failing business, Bovan Advertising, his own business, his own printing business, and he would print various materials for industrial equipment makers. I remember one client was Carter Pumps, or Carter Pump, something like that. He had an office in East Orange. He had a printing press. I remember sometimes I would go over there on weekends, help him, print stuff, or he would bring printing jobs home. I would collate them for him, things like that. He never made any money at the business. He had a failing business his whole life. My parents moved down here. My mother used to work in Data Incorporated in Orange. My mother and father would drive to work together. My mother's company, Data, moved out to California. She went out there to help them move, and then she had no job. So she came back here. They moved from Irvington to Beechwood. So they weren't there very long, but they got a divorce after 30 years of marriage. At the time, they were living in that Beechwood house, which was a much nicer house than this house. My father was 60 years old. They got a divorce. They lost the Beechwood house. My father went up to Union to live with my mother's brother, my Uncle Eddie, which he had inherited his mother's house, my grandmother's house. My father went up there to live with my Uncle Eddie. My mother came here. My brother bought her this house. My mother came here to Bayville. We'll leave out the part about me. We'll stick to one thing at a time. So she came here. My father applied to the DEP for a job. He took the state civil service exam. He had veterans preference, so he got the job. He had veterans preference because he was a Marine. He was in the Marines in World War II. He was on Iwo Jima. So he got veterans preference. He got the job. So what he did was, his job didn't start out that way, but it evolved into, he would travel around. He had a state car. He would travel around the state to various medical facilities and check their radiation equipment, MRI centers, X-ray centers. He would check them for radiation levels, that they were safe, and he traveled all around the state doing that. And his office was in East Windsor, which I think it was East Windsor, but it was around the Princeton area. So it was a couple hours drive from here. So if he wasn't like going out traveling to some facility, he was at his office, which was a couple hours drive. So it was, it was a lot of driving for one thing. I know my father had the occasion to one time he totaled his state car because he was trying to avoid some animal crossing the road, and he swerved to avoid it. He totaled his car. Anyway, that's a total, not related. It's just an aside. Okay, so I came down here in July 94. Okay. So he was working there. So in summer of 2001, he was still working at age 76. His birthday being September 25th, 1924. So around July 2001, he had not been feeling well. He could not keep down any food. His stomach was bothering him, and he wasn't eating. So he wanted to make an appointment to see the family doctor. It was his and my mother's doctor. I didn't go to Hinkle, really. His and my mother's doctor was Brad Hinkle on Water Street in Toms River. So he wanted to go see him, but he called up and, Dr. Hinkle's on vacation. So he waited around for a week for Hinkle to come back from vacation. I took him, finally he got an appointment, and I took him to the appointment. He saw Dr. Hinkle. Dr. Hinkle said, "I don't know what's wrong with you. You should go to the emergency room." So I took him from there to the emergency room. I waited around for him for a little while, and then he told me, he said, they want to keep me here, do some more tests. So I said, okay, so I went home. So after a couple days, he called my mother, and he said, they told me I have liver cancer. So, my father was a heavy drinker. But, that was the first thing that popped in my mind as to why he had liver cancer. I found out later, after his death, he had colon cancer initially that metastasized to the liver. I really didn't know anything, about chemotherapy drugs or, anything of secondary, primary. I didn't know about that at that time. But anyway, he had colon cancer that metastasized to the liver. Okay. So he was in the hospital getting tests. They kept him there for about a week. After a week, they said he could come home. And the situation was he was in bad shape and probably not going to live much longer, but there was no reason to keep him in the hospital. So they said he could go home. I went to pick him up at the hospital. I waited forever and ever and ever for them to release him. And the problem was they couldn't find a wheelchair for him to be wheeled down to the hospital entrance, and my car was parked right at the entrance. But, so they couldn't find a wheelchair. My father was he couldn't walk too good. He was so weak, he couldn't really walk very well. And the question was, if he didn't have a wheelchair, could he make it from his room down to the car? So after a while, he got tired of waiting, and he said, well, I'll try to walk. And they allowed him to leave. So he barely made it to my car. We drove home. At some point, shortly thereafter, my mother and I took him to an appointment with an oncologist to see about any chemotherapy treatments. My father was, wheelchair bound, and his ankles were very swollen. And the oncologist looked at him and said, he's not in physically good enough shape to be able to withstand chemotherapy. Really, he can't get chemotherapy. That's the irony of chemotherapy. You have to be physically healthy to get it, right? Anyway, that's another story. So he couldn't get chemotherapy. And my father was kind of unaware that his condition was terminal, and I remember him saying to my mother at that appointment, saying, I have to get back to work. I wonder when I'm going to be able to get back to work, So that weekend, so then we're in the beginning of September. So my father's boss had called up and said he wanted to come here. My father's boss, his first name is John. I don't remember his last name. He wanted to come here to talk to my father about filling out a beneficiary paperwork for his pension. My father had maybe $69,000 pension, and he hadn't filled out any beneficiary paperwork. And the situation was that you had to have this filled out and processed while the person is still alive for it to be valid, right? So John came down here and was trying to explain this to my father. And I remember, that table I have out that you see my cats on out on my porch. That was a picnic table that was outside the door. And John came here, and my father couldn't even make it to walk from the living room. He barely made it to that table to sit there and talk, and for John to talk to him about, the situation that you got to fill out this paperwork. My father really was in a daze, and he really wasn't comprehending. So the onus was on my mother to try to get this all filled out. So I remember before my father passed away, I remember that Friday. So we're talking about September 7th then, I guess. My mother had called up. My mother was trying to get this paperwork notarized and everything. She called up my Aunt Judy to come over, who's a notary public, to notarize the paperwork that my father would sign. My mother put the paper in front of my father. He could barely sign it. He didn't even know what he was doing, and his signature was like chicken scratch. But anyway, she managed to get this all filled out. I made a point of mailing it that Friday so it would get to the DEP office as soon as possible. The next day, my brother came down to see my father, and by the time the evening rolled around, my father was in such bad shape. My brother called up Brad Hinkle's on-call doctor, so this is the weekend, off hours, explained the situation, and my father's condition was deteriorating, and that doctor said, well, bring him to the emergency room. So my brother and I took him in the wheelchair. He was wheelchair bound, and he was barely, again, he wasn't really comprehending anything, but we took him to the emergency room. They did tests on him, and I remember the doctor said to me, he's really in bad shape. He's not going to last much longer. So my brother stayed there at my father's bedside the whole night. I came home here. My mother, the next day, went to the hospital. I went with her. I forget exactly how the shuttling situation with the cars went, but I remember that I went with my mother to the hospital the next day. My brother was still there. They stayed there the whole day. I didn't stay the whole day. I couldn't stand it, I couldn't stand it. Anyway, I came home. They stayed there the whole day, and they came home later. I forget exactly how the car situation worked out. But my mother had said, she said to me that night, the doctor, they did an EKG or something. They said his heart was strong. and his heart checked out okay. So so then that night around, so my brother went home. My brother eventually came home. They came home. My brother went home to his house to get some clothing, get some extra clothes, change of clothes, to come back down here and stay, for an extended period of time, to visit my father. And so he went home. That night around 11 p.m., the doctor called up. I took the call, and he said my father passed away. My mother, even though she was expecting it, she was alarmed, and she said, but the doctor said his heart was strong, I remember, and just to digress for a second, when we all were at the hospital, and I remember my brother talking about, well, maybe we should move my father to a nursing home and so on, and my mother said no. She said because he's terminal, so why would he be in a hospital? My mother said no, he's not moving. He's not being upset. They don't have the legal right to put him out, even though he's terminally ill and he's not there's no medical treatment, because my mother had already decided against extraordinary measures, anything like that. So she said, but no, they can't put him out. I don't want to upset, whatever upsetment it would cause him to move to a nursing home and all that. So she said, no, he's still in the hospital. So anyway, they called that night, 11 p.m. They said my father had passed away. My mother was surprised. The doctor had just said they did a test on his heart, and his heart was fine, was good. So then that Monday, my brother came down. He came down the next day, and he came down anyway and took me and my mother out to dinner. He took us out to dinner, and anyway, he just came down. And so Monday, September 10th, I called the DEP office to find out, to tell them I had mailed this paperwork on Friday, but my father passed away over the weekend. Would it still be valid? Would it be valid as a document as to a beneficiary for my father's pension? And they said, yeah, it would be. It's okay. So that's okay. So my mother had the choice. She could have taken the pension as a lump sum, a one-time payout, or she could have taken it monthly payments for the rest of her life. So she chose the monthly payments. So then September 11th, in the morning, 2001, my mother and I are sitting in the living room. She's on the phone with the Social Security office trying to sort out on getting my father's Social Security payments transferred to her. And we're just sitting there. There's no TV on or anything. We're just sitting there. And the guy on the phone says to her, there's something happening here. I can't hang on the phone too long. So I think she managed to get everything straightened out or figured out. Anyway, she hung up that call. Shortly thereafter, my Aunt Joan called around 10 a.m. and said, there's something going on. Turn on the TV. So we turned on the TV and saw the World Trade Center attacks. And I remember watching, and of course it's shocking, it's shocking. And I remember watching and I was watching the TV at the time. The second tower fell, and I saw it fall, crumble, disintegrate on the TV. So then I told you that my mother died actually 2 years later, September 19th, 2003, when she was 74 years old. And her birthday is September 30th. So she died September 30th, 1928. So she died at age 74 in 2003, September 19th, just shy of her 75th birthday. My father died September 8th, 2001, just shy of his 77th birthday, September 25th. So they were both died in September. Anyway, so now my father died without a will, so my mother thought that my father, and he told her he did. He had a bank account with $96,000 in it, and he had made it a joint account so she could have access to it. Well, she went to try to access it, and they said, no, you're not on this account. You're not named on this account. You don't have access to it. So my mother was upset about that, and I can't remember the name of the bank. But if you look on my videos when I walk to the food bank, I walk up Sloop Creek Road, and I'm going to cross Route 9. Well, the place where the bank used to be is now called Jersey Appliances. And if you look on the video, there's I don't know if you can see Bayville Manor. It's across the street. There's Bayville Manor, which is like a nursing home, and then it's to the left of that, and it's a Jersey Appliances. But at that time, in 2001, it was a branch of the bank. That was the branch of the bank where my father had his bank account. I don't remember the name of the bank. They merge all the time. They're always changing. My mother had a World Savings account. She had about $30-something of her own money, World Savings, of which I was on that account too. World Savings, 30-something thousand in Forked River, which is now that particular branch merged. Well, actually, World Savings doesn't exist anymore, but that became something else, and then whatever bank that was became a Wells Fargo. So it's now a Wells Fargo, the bank that yeah, I no longer bank at. Okay, so she couldn't get access to this $96,000. My father had no will. So basically they told her, well, you have to go through all the paperwork with the surrogate court, which my mother did. She did that, and she got it. But the point is, they said there was no evidence that it was ever a joint account. So that's all I basically wanted to say. And basically, you know, I saw or get the feeling people think, well, there's a lot of, you know, bad news, bad things happening. Yeah, but just imagine going through all this and nobody has a clue, including me and nobody else, as to what the hell is really happening. So my point being, now we have a clue as to what's happening, so that's better than not having a clue. So that's the end of this video. 22 minutes and 30 seconds, and there's no third-party copyright infringement. So this is my video, people.